You wake up, wash your hands, dry them off, and sit at the kitchen table. You pull out the little testing kit, prick your finger, and watch the countdown on the small screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there it is, a number that makes absolutely no sense. A number that is 20 points higher than it was yesterday, even though you ate the exact same dinner, took your medication at the exact same time, and did your evening walk just like you always do. I know the feeling of staring at that little screen and feeling a quiet, heavy exhaustion settle into your chest. Not just physical tiredness, but the deep weariness of fighting a battle where someone keeps changing the rules in the middle of the night. I am Harold Bennett. I am 81 years old. A few years ago, I found myself sitting at my own kitchen table here in Scottsdale, staring at morning numbers that were slowly but surely creeping up into a dangerous pre-diabetic range. I have spent a good portion of my life working in community health education, translating medical information for folks like us so they could actually use it. I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. I was eating carefully. I had cut out the breads and the heavy desserts I grew up eating back in Ohio. I was walking the neighborhood every morning before the Arizona sun got too hot. I was doing everything by the book, but my morning fasting numbers were climbing from 110 to 130, and sometimes hitting 145. I remember looking at my hands one morning, noticing how dry and papery my skin had become, and thinking that maybe this was just it. Maybe my engine was finally just wearing out. When you get past 75, it is very easy to convince yourself that a declining body is just the rent you pay for getting older. But the unpredictability of my blood sugar was driving me crazy. I would eat a plain chicken breast and a small portion of vegetables for dinner and still wake up with a high number. It felt like I was being punished for doing the right thing. My daughter Laura came down from Phoenix for a Sunday visit shortly after that. She is a registered nurse, and she has that practical, no-nonsense way of looking at things that reminds me so much of her mother, Margaret. I had my daily log spread out on the table, trying to make sense of the erratic numbers. Laura sat down, poured herself a glass of water, and started looking over my food diary. She agreed that everything looked textbook perfect. Then she looked up from the paper, pointed at my coffee cup, and asked me to walk her through exactly what I drank on a normal day. I told her the truth. I had 2 cups of coffee in the morning to get going. Maybe a small glass of water with my pills at breakfast. Sometimes an iced tea in the late afternoon while sitting on the porch. I told her I just was not ever really thirsty, so I did not think about it. Laura set her glass down and explained something that shifted my entire understanding of what was happening inside my own body. She reminded me of something I should have remembered from my working years. After we cross into our late 60s, our natural thirst mechanism begins to break down. We lose the early warning system. By the time someone my age actually feels thirsty, we are already significantly dehydrated. But the real problem was how I was counting my liquids. I thought the coffee and the iced tea were doing the job. They are liquids, after all. Laura explained that coffee and tea act as mild diuretics. For every cup I drank, I was losing more than half of that volume through the kidneys. It was like trying to keep a rain barrel full when there is a hole near the bottom. I was functioning in a chronic state of low-level drought, and I had absolutely no idea because I never felt parched. Then she explained what that invisible dehydration was doing to my blood sugar. It all comes down to the cell membranes. She told me to picture a dried-out kitchen sponge sitting on the edge of the sink. If you pour a cup of water over a bone-dry sponge, the water just runs right off the sides and down the drain. The sponge is too rigid to absorb anything. Our cells work the exact same way. When we are chronically dehydrated, the cell membranes become stiff and rigid. The pancreas can be doing its job, the insulin can be knocking on the door, but if the cell membrane is dried out, the receptors simply shut down. The sugar cannot get inside the cell where it belongs. So it just stays trapped in the bloodstream, circulating and driving up those morning numbers. I realized my blood sugar was not spiking because of what I was eating. It was climbing because my cells physically could not open the door to let the fuel inside. That next morning, I completely changed my routine. I did not touch the coffee pot first thing. Instead, the moment my feet hit the floor, I went to the kitchen and drank 12 ounces of water. After 7 or 8 hours of sleep without fluids, our blood literally thickens overnight. That first morning drink rehydrates the bloodstream, allowing it to flow easily and deliver insulin the way it is supposed to. And I had to change how I drank it. Living in Arizona, you get used to pulling everything straight from the refrigerator. Ice cold water feels like a necessity here in the summer. But Laura warned me against that. When ice cold water hits an empty stomach, especially when your core temperature is low from sleeping, the body panics slightly. It tries to protect its core temperature by constricting the blood vessels. When your blood vessels tighten up, circulation slows down and the insulin cannot travel efficiently. Not to mention, the sudden cold shocks the digestive system and releases a little burst of stress hormones, which prompts the liver to dump stored sugar into the blood. So I started drinking my morning water at room temperature. It was not as crisp, but it kept my system calm and my blood vessels open. I also made one more crucial addition. I went to the local health food store and bought a small bottle of liquid trace minerals. I started adding just a few drops to my water pitcher every day. Water needs electrolytes to actually pull inside the cells and do its job. Drinking plain, over-filtered water without any minerals is like showing up at a locked door without the right key. Those few drops of magnesium and potassium were the keys that finally allowed the hydration to get past the rigid cell walls. I did not just change my morning routine. I changed the timing for the rest of the day. I started drinking a glass of water exactly 30 minutes before my meals. Not right as I was sitting down to eat, and not during the meal, because that just dilutes the stomach acid you need for digestion. 30 minutes beforehand gives the stomach time to prepare. It slows down the rate at which food empties into the small intestine. When the food moves slower, the carbohydrates are absorbed much more gradually into the bloodstream. It creates a gentle, manageable hill for your insulin to climb rather than a steep cliff. And perhaps the hardest habit to break was how I drank. When older folks are told to drink more water, our first instinct is to realize we forgot all day, and then try to chug a massive glass all at once to catch up. But your body cannot process it that way. If you take a fire hose to the dry, hardpan dirt in my backyard, the ground cannot absorb it. It just floods and runs off into the street. The roots stay completely dry. You need a slow, steady drip. So I started keeping a glass near me, taking small, frequent sips throughout the morning and the middle of the afternoon, maintaining a steady rain instead of a flash flood. I will be completely honest with you about the first week. It was incredibly frustrating. I felt like I was living in the bathroom. My body was so used to operating in drought mode that it did not know what to do with the sudden influx of water. It just flushed it straight through. I almost called Laura to tell her I was quitting. But she had warned me about this, and she told me to push through. By the second week, my kidneys adjusted. My bladder learned to adapt. The urgency faded away as my cells finally started holding on to the moisture they had been starved of for years. By the third week, something remarkable happened. The mental fog that I had just accepted as a normal part of being in my 80s began to lift. I had more sustained energy in the late afternoons. And when I sat down at the kitchen table to prick my finger, the numbers finally made sense again. The readings dropped from the 140s down into the 1-teens. A few weeks later, I was consistently waking up to numbers around 100. I had not changed a single thing about my meals, my medications, or my daily walks. I just fixed the foundation of the house. After 60, the small things are the things that matter the most. We spend so much time, energy, and money trying to micromanage complex diets and track every single carbohydrate to the gram. We look for complicated medical solutions while completely ignoring the most fundamental requirement our body has. You cannot run a complex engine on empty and expect it to perform perfectly. Your medications, your diet, and your exercise can only do their jobs if the environment inside your body is properly prepared to receive them. If you are staring at numbers that do not make sense and you feel exhausted from fighting a battle you cannot seem to win, look at your daily habits. Look at the glass on your counter. The body does not ask twice in the same way, but it is remarkably forgiving when you finally give it what it needs. You do not have to wait until things break down completely to start repairing the foundation. The independence you want tomorrow is protected by the small habits you build today. You still have time to make a change that matters. I am Harold Bennett. Take care of yourself, and I will talk to you soon.